Some important concepts under commercial law. Letters of credit and trust receipts. What is the doctrine of independence? The relationship of the buyer and the bank is separate and distinct from the relationship of the buyer and the seller in the main contract. The bank is not required to investigate if the contract underlying the letters of credit has been fulfilled or not, because in transactions involving letters of credit, banks deal only with documents and not goods. What is the fraud exception principle? The principle that limits the application of the independence principle only to instances where it would serve the commercial function of the credit and not when fraud attends the transaction. What is the doctrine of strict compliance? The documents tendered by the seller, beneficiary must strictly conform to the terms of the letters of credit. The tender of documents must include all documents required by the letters of credit. Thus, a correspondent bank which departs from what has been stipulated under the letters of credit acts on its own risk and may not recover from the buyer or the issuing bank the money thus paid to the beneficiary. Transportation. What is meant by extraordinary diligence? It is that extreme measure of care and caution which prudent persons use for securing and preserving their own property or rights. The law requires common carriers to render service with the greatest skill and utmost foresight. Corporation law provisions of BP 68 not affected by RA 11232. How is the nationality of a corporation determined? The nationality of a corporation may be determined using the following tests. A. Place of incorporation test. The corporation is a national of the country under whose laws it is organized or incorporated. B. Control test. A corporation shall be considered a Filipino corporation if the Filipino ownership of its capital stock is at least 60%, and where the 60-40 Filipino alien equity ownership is not in doubt. C. Grandfather rule method used when a corporation has both domestic and foreign stockholders to determine whether or not said corporation is qualified to engage in a partially nationalized business. What is a derivative suit? It is one brought by one or more stockholders or members in the name and on behalf of the corporation to redress wrongs committed against it or to protect or vindicate corporate rights whenever the officials of the corporation refuse to sue or are the ones to be sued or hold control of the corporation. Securities Regulation Code. What acts are considered insider trading? A. To sell or buy a security of the issuer while in possession of material information with respect to the issuer or the security that is not generally available to the public, unless 1. The insider proves that the information was not gained from such relationship, or 2. If the other party selling to or buying from the insider, or his agent, is identified, the insider proves, first, that he disclosed the information to the other party, or, last, that he had reason to believe that the other party otherwise is also in possession of the information. B. To communicate material non-public information about the issuer or the security to any person who, by virtue of the communication, becomes an insider where the insider communicating the information knows or has reason to believe that such person will likely buy or sell a security of the issuer while in possession of such information. What is tender offer? A publicly announced intention by a person acting alone or in concert with other person to acquire equity securities of a public company. It is in place to protect the interest of the minority stockholder of a target against any scheme that dilutes the share value of their investments. Banking laws. What is the close now, here later scheme? The Monetary Board may direct a bank to stop operations and place it under receivership even without prior notice and hearing. It is enough that such action is made subject of a subsequent judicial review. Intellectual property law. Trademark. Any visible sign capable of distinguishing the goods or services of an enterprise and shall include a stamped or marked container of goods. Trade name. The name or designation identifying or distinguishing an enterprise. Copyright. Literary and artistic works which are original intellectual creations in the literary and artistic domain protected from the moment of their creation. Patentable invention, any technical solution to a problem in any field of human activity which is new, involves an inventive step, and is industrially applicable. What are the tests in patent infringement? A. Literal test. Resort must be had, in the first instance, to words of the claim. If the subject matter clearly falls within the claim, infringement is committed. B. Doctrine of Equivalence. There is infringement where a device appropriates a prior invention by incorporating its innovative concept and, although with some modifications and changes, performs substantially the same function in substantially the same way to achieve substantially the same result. Doctrine of Fair Use. The fair use of copyrighted work for criticism, news reporting, teaching, including multiple copies for classroom use, research and similar purposes, is not an infringement of copyright. Data Privacy Act. Processing sensitive personal information is not prohibited. A. There was consent for specific purpose from the data subject prior to the processing. B. The processing of the same is provided for by existing laws and regulations. Requirements. 1. Such regulatory enactments guarantee the protection of the sensitive personal information and the privileged information, and 2. The consent of the data subjects is not required by law or regulation permitting the processing of the sensitive personal information or the privileged information. C. The processing is necessary to protect the life and health of the data subject or another person, and the data subject is not legally or physically able to express his or her consent prior to the processing. D. The processing is necessary to achieve the lawful and non-commercial objectives of public organizations and their associations. Requirements. 1. Such processing is only confined and related to the bona fide members of these organizations or their associations. 2. The sensitive personal information is not transferred to third parties. 3. Consent of the data subject was obtained prior to processing. E. The processing is necessary for purposes of medical treatment, is carried out by a medical practitioner or a medical treatment institution, and an adequate level of protection of personal information is ensured. F. The processing concerns such personal information as is necessary for the protection of lawful rights and interests of natural or legal persons in court proceedings, or the establishment, exercise or defense of legal claims, or when provided to government or public authority. Financial rehabilitation, insolvency, liquidation and suspension of payments. What is a stay or suspension order? It is an integral part of commencement order which is issued when petitioner corporation has been placed under rehabilitation to enable receiver to effectively exercise its powers free from any judicial or extrajudicial interference that might unduly hinder the rescue of the distressed company, and to prevent a creditor from obtaining an advantage or preference over another with respect to actions against the corporation. What is rehabilitation plan? It is a plan by which the financial well-being and viability of an insolvent debtor can be restored using various means including, but not limited to, debt forgiveness, debt rescheduling, reorganization or quasi-reorganization, dation and paygo, debt equity conversion and sale of the business or parts of it as a going concern, or setting up of new business entity, or other similar arrangements as may be approved by the court or creditors. When is cram-down permitted? Notwithstanding the rejection of the rehabilitation plan, the court may confirm the rehabilitation plan in what is known as a cram-down. A cram-down is permitted if all of the following circumstances are present. A. The rehabilitation plan complies with the requirements under FRIA. B. The rehabilitation receiver recommends the confirmation of the rehabilitation plan. C. The shareholders, owners or partners of the juridical debtor lose at least their controlling interest as a result of the rehabilitation plan, and D. The rehabilitation plan would likely provide the objecting class of creditors with compensation which has a net present value greater than that which they would have received if the debtor were under liquidation.